Hello, and welcome to the Megan Taylor Creative Podcast, a show for entrepreneurs looking to grow their business with digital marketing. In this episode, I'll be talking about how to write a blog post that inspires action. Let's get started. In this episode of the Megan Taylor Creator Podcast, I wanted to talk about how to write a blog post because I feel like anyone can write a blog post, but it takes a certain level of skill and experience to actually write a blog post that inspires action and genuinely engages your target reader. So after about 4+ years of marketing experience with a particular focus on content writing, I feel like I've kind of picked up a lot of tips and tricks that I can share with you. And if writing blog posts is something that you are struggling with, and writing blog posts that actually convert and get your audience to move through your sales funnel, then this episode is definitely for you. The first thing that I wanted to actually talk about was how to write an interesting introduction. And I will be honest and say that introductions are something that I used to really actually struggle with when I first started out writing corporate blog posts in the early stages of my marketing career. And that's because I always kind of saw the introduction in the same way that I would see like an essay, like writing an essay. I was still very much in that school academic mindset that you would be in university, and I learned very quickly that that wasn't how my managers wanted me to approach writing introductions. They actually wanted me to obviously introduce the topic, but in a way that's actually interesting and in a way that basically moves the blog post forward and starts to increase brand awareness levels and starts to slowly push the user down the buyer's journey. And the best ways that I have personally found to start your blog posts in a way that's going to help you do all of those things is to essentially address your readers' pain points. And there are a lot of different ways that you can do this, but I have personally found that asking the right questions is the best. It starts to get your reader thinking about their actual problems. And as a lot of us know, some readers don't know that they are experiencing a problem and they don't know that they need to actually solve it. So asking questions that starts to get them in that mindset and starts to get them to think about, okay, what is this problem and how can I actually solve it, is a really effective way to get them hooked. Because what you can then do in the introduction is essentially introduce the promise. And this is kind of something that I spoke about in one of the previous episodes of the Megan Taylor Creator Podcast, but you can introduce the promise actually in the introduction and say, okay, well, you got this problem, but here's how we might potentially solve it. Here's what your life could essentially look like if you solved that issue. And once the reader starts thinking about the life after the transformation, then they'll want to know more, and that's when they're hooked and they start actually reading. Now that you've written the introduction, which is arguably one of the most important parts of your blog post, you'll want to start to not only introduce the topic on a much deeper level, but you'll want to explore the problem that your target audience has even further. And I think that the best way to do this is to look on Google and see what kind of questions people are actually asking around those topics. And that should give you an understanding of how to structure this part of your blog post. But I think it's not enough to engage by just answering the questions. I think you do need to bring in a lot of the principles that we discussed in the 7 principles of creative content marketing episode. You need to tell a story and you need to bring in your own life experiences and use visuals to essentially enhance your point and just make it easier for your target audience to visualize that transformation, because again, that is going to be key to inspiring action. Obviously, I've started talking a lot about what to actually include, but I want to kind of preface all of this by saying that in order to bring all of this together effectively, you really need to have a structure. And I'm the sort of person who hates to have a structure. I really enjoy the writing process. It's why I got into marketing in the first place, so that I could write for a living essentially. And I just find structures very difficult. But in order for my writing to be valuable, and high converting, it does need to be well thought out. And the best way to do that is to actually think about what you're going to say prior to actually sitting down and writing. And obviously, there's lots of different blog post structures that you can consider when you're actually sitting down and planning your blog post. I personally really like how to's. I think that they're very kind of organic and they really enable you to get into the nitty gritty of your chosen topic. But I also like, guides, and I think that listicles are great as well. And then you've also got things like case studies where you're actually bringing in the story of a real life person. So whether that's a customer or a client or a business partner that you've been working with, or it could be like a charitable partner, you can use a case study to shed light on a cause. So yeah, not only do you need to think about your points, but you need to think about the actual structure of the blog post, and then actually creating an outline prior to writing will make it a lot easier. It will essentially take a lot of the guesswork out of writing a blog post, and you will be able to start writing much more quickly than if you were just to stare at a blank page without any thoughts or pointers to guide you along the way. So my next kind of tip for writing blog posts that really inspire action is to actually use persuasive writing techniques. And persuasive writing techniques are something that I've really started to knuckle down on and practice with my own writing. And I tend to practice them with my own blog posts and copy as well. And especially social media, I use persuasive writing techniques a lot in my social media posts, specifically Instagram. I like Instagram because I feel like writing a caption is almost like writing a mini blog post. So I'd highly recommend kind of testing the waters over there. Obviously, you need to create like a caption and an accompanying image to go with it, but you could just use a stock image if you really just wanted to focus on the writing aspect. But I'd highly recommend kind of creating more branded graphics, because then once you've kind of got that template, you can start adopting that in your visuals that you use for your actual company blog. So yeah, persuasive writing techniques. I've already kind of mentioned rhetorical questions, but there's lots of other things like social proof, which is really great for, I guess, giving your brand credibility. And also I like to use repetition a lot, especially if you've got a really strong brand. A lot of brands who have, I guess, specific sayings that they say all the time. I'm thinking of things like M&S. They obviously use that in pretty much every advert that they do and every social media post, and they've got like their own branded hashtag. It's the same with like Audi and things like that as well. So just like look at what other big brands are doing and take inspiration from that, and think about how you can fit that into your actual your own content. So the next thing to think about, if this is applicable to what you're trying to achieve with your blog, is SEO. And I have a lot of experience with SEO, so this part comes very naturally to me. But I know from speaking with a lot of clients who haven't got as much first-hand experience actually writing SEO-driven content, this might not only how to do keyword research, but how to do it effectively and how to make sure that you implement those keywords in a way that is natural. In this past week, I've spoken a lot about keyword stuffing, which is essentially a practice where certain marketers will basically include their keywords a noticeable amount of times in their content in the hopes to actually beat the system a little bit so that they can get to the first page of Google. But the thing is that Google is aware that this practice is a thing, and Google doesn't necessarily want content like that reads robotically and that reads, I guess, very unnaturally and doesn't really have much value to it. It wants to provide its users with the best content possible. So by doing this, you're actually hurting your chances of ranking on the first page of Google, and Google will penalize your content if it recognizes keyword stuffing. So yeah, like I said, I've spoken a lot on social media about why you shouldn't do this, but let's talk about how you can avoid doing it whilst also still writing content that is SEO friendly. So the first way is to incorporate the keywords naturally into your content. And from experience, the best way to do this is to make sure to include your primary and secondary keywords in the introduction, typically within like the first couple of sentences, as this kind of wakes up Google and lets them know, okay, this is what the blog post is actually about. But I would include the primary and secondary keyword if you can, although it's not always possible, in your actual title as well. And a lot of the time, this is really easy to do because a lot of keywords are actually phrased like a question, like an actual question, rather than just a statement. So if you're doing like how-to post, for example, and the overarching theme is your primary keyword, then that's going to be really easy to do. Your blog title is literally just going to be the question. And the thing that's going to entice the reader is the fact that your content should, in theory, answer the actual question that they're searching for. But you also want to make sure to kind of include those primaries and secondary keywords every so often throughout the blog post, just to make sure that Google really gets an understanding of what your content is actually about. And it's a lot easier to do this more naturally when your content is long form. I find that SEO pieces that are shorter, I typically struggle with if the client has requested like more than 7 keywords, for example, because then I feel like it does start to come obvious. And the thing is that most web pages will rank for more keywords than you're actually targeting for. So just remember that. And I would personally be very selective with the keywords that you're actually choosing. And you obviously want to include them in things like meta descriptions and also like alt text for images as well. So this is like very basic, like on page SEO, but even though it's basic information, people still kind of get this wrong. So it's important to address this again and just make sure that you're focusing on including the keywords and making sure that you're giving your content the best chance of success, while also making sure that your reader is the primary focus here. So the last thing that I really wanted to talk about to bring this all together is to make sure that you have a really strong, well thought out CTA. And your CTA is going to be different depending on the type of blog post that you are writing. So for example, if it's a blog post that's more awareness stage content, the likelihood is that you'll probably want your target audience to actually go and download a piece of content that you've written offline. And to do that, they need to subscribe to your mailing list, for example. And you may also have like what I like to call like mini CTAs throughout your content as well. So I like to have like little social media snippets and then like a link to my actual social media page. So that's quite effective for gaining more followers that way. But then again, if it's like a decision stage piece of content, then you're going to focus on that purchase. And that's where you need to kind of use really powerful verbs to kind of inspire. And people think, yes, I do actually want to purchase this product. I do want to solve this problem. And yeah, just here, it's so important to go back to those persuasive writing techniques, because you're not done until you've actually got the customer to do what you wanted them to do, which is to do the action that you planned for them to take. And that is another thing as well. You need to make sure that you're planning your CTAs before you start, because that will drive your entire blog post and the sort of language that you use and how you kind of incorporate your brand messaging and the sort of internal links that you use, for example, as well. So just always plan that ahead of time, and then that way your blog post will make way more sense and be way more engaging to the reader. So yeah, that's it. That's everything that I have for you today. It's a bit of a shorter episode because I feel like I said at the beginning, everyone kind of knows how to at least start writing a blog post, but this episode was made specifically to help you actually get better at writing blog posts that actually convert. Obviously, if you do need a content writer, you can work with Megan Taylor Creative. I have several plans available on my website, or if you just need a more ad hoc, personalized plan, I guess you can just message me on social media or on my contact form on the Megan Taylor Creative website. And yeah, as always, if you liked this episode, please subscribe to the Megan Taylor Creative YouTube channel and like and share on social media if you found it particularly useful. If you really want to support the show, we also have a Ko-fi page. Any support that we get over there is really appreciated, and you'll also get some exclusive content as well in exchange for helping us out. So thank you so much. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you next week. Thank you for listening. Bye.